Okay. So good afternoon and welcome to Vermont Interfaith Action's Gubernatorial Candidates Forum. Welcome especially to Barry and to the Church of the Good Shepherd here. Our forum today will take place by giving each candidate 3 minutes for an opening statement. A Vermont Interfaith Action clergy person will then ask questions, 7 questions with 2-minute answers apiece, and then a 3-minute closing statement. The candidates in order of appearance today will be Esther Charleston from the Democratic Party, June Goodband from the Peace and Justice Party, and Kevin Hoyt, an independent. Kevin Hoyt will be on video and he will be questioned on video as well. Just a couple other things. If you need to use the facilities, the restroom is through that door and out the foyer. And I'd ask everybody to please silence your cell phone at this point because we don't want to have calls in the middle of it here. That's my little joke. Okay, and without further ado, we will ask Ms. Charleston and Deacon Beth Ann Mayer from Christ Church to come up to begin the questions.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming and doing this for Vermont Interfaith Action.
Absolutely, it's an honor. Thank you for having me.
So our first question is around shelter and housing. The current lack of shelter and housing in many parts of Vermont is at a level of crisis that demands immediate response from state officials. Vermont ranks 2nd in the nation per capita for unhoused people and families. What concrete steps would your administration take to most effectively reduce homelessness, and I'm going to add lack of shelter, in Vermont? And what concrete steps will your administration take to increase the availability of affordable housing in the state?
Ms. Charleston, you can make an opening statement for 3 minutes, then you can ask the question again.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you. So good to see everyone. My name is Esther Charleston, and you heard that right. I am running for governor of Vermont. Let's name a few elephants in the room. I'm running against the most popular governor in the United States, so they say. I am a Black woman running in a predominantly white space, taking that stance and being present. Well, let me tell you, I moved to Vermont a few years ago with 2 of my children, and I chose Vermont to be my home. When I did, that meant I got engaged in my community. So I actually joined the UU in Middlebury, my home church, and got involved with Middlebury Select Board. So at first I was like, what's a select board? I remember a friend of mine on the select board said, Esther, you should run. I was like, what's that? And then I began to learn how it works and how decisions are made for the town. And so I ran 2 successful campaigns for the Middlebury Select Board. I was then appointed to be on the Vermont's Commission on Women, which I currently chair, traveling the state, really listening and engaging with women all across Vermont to learn what they need and how we can support each other. So why governor? Why? Well, as I looked at the gaps in our state, I saw that a huge gap is the governor, who has been there for 8 years, but there are some gaps, some concerns that I have that I believed it was important to speak up and speak out about. So here I am on this journey to run, be honest, be open. It's a grassroots campaign, so I've made a lot work with very little, but that is okay. It is important for our democracy to say something. And who would have thought I would have done it in the year of Kamala Harris? Yes, I said it. The year of Kamala Harris. So honored to be a part and to see the breath of fresh air and hope that her candidacy has brought to our party and to the United States in general. So I continue this march and plan on being at the debates, continuing with the forums, talking about the hard stuff and what Vermonters, all Vermonters, need to thrive here. So thank you again for having me.
So the current lack of shelter and housing in many parts of Vermont is at a level of crisis that demands immediate response from state officials. Vermont ranks second in the nation per capita for unhoused people and families. What concrete steps would your administration take to most effectively reduce homelessness in Vermont? What concrete steps will your administration take to increase the availability of affordable housing in the state?
Thank you for that question. As I walk the streets of Burlington or even Middlebury, and I see tents up, knowing that families are now, because the motel program has ended, now getting tents and trying to make it work and thrive here, and communities coming together. Our homelessness issue is rising. More people are on the streets and don't know what to do. I believe, and my administration believes, in a housing first model. So it's about getting folks housed first, and then we can figure out the rest. And what that looks like is getting them the resources that they need. I think about mental health. I think about maybe substance abuse, counseling, whatever it may be. I think about children maybe needing after school care or support in that way. So I believe it's important that we house them first, would be my motto. And then when it comes to affordable housing, listen, housing is a top priority, one of the most pressing issues, as rent is ridiculous. I am a renter myself in a 2-bedroom, $2,500 a month. I'm sorry, did you hear that? No. Okay, a lot of people I know have mortgages lower than that. And right now it's unsustainable. People are working 2 or 3 jobs to make it work, and it's not working. And so my administration would focus on not only the regulatory barriers, of course, and working with select boards, just changing our zoning policies to make sure that we can build mixed houses in urban areas and mixed income housing in urban areas as well as rural areas, so we have options so that everybody can thrive. I think about the widow who has a huge house who cannot move because they don't know where to move to because they're not able to afford a place that will work. Or I think about young families, myself included, and myself and my partner and our 2 children, and trying to pay rent, trying to make it work. So creating a Vermont where everybody can thrive no matter where your income is.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with transportation, which can influence someone's job prospects, accessibility to essential services like medical appointments, and has an impact on the environment. If elected, what are your top 2 transportation priorities?
Transportation is everything, especially if you live in a rural area. And so I believe that it's important that we expand our public transportation so everybody has access, not only in the urban areas, but in the rural areas as well. My administration would also focus on just boosting up electric vehicles, making sure we have the infrastructure and people have options to transition from gas to electric, which can be a steep cost, but making sure that folks have options to do so.
Thank you. Education has been a widely talked about topic in Vermont this year. Should you become governor, what would be your 2 top priorities in making education accessible for our students and affordable for Vermont homeowners?
Well, I was an administrator at a middle school, and I saw the importance of children having access. I oversaw 504 plans. I've sat in on IEP meetings, and what that is accommodations for students. And I've seen how those accommodations have gone up and the stress that it can be on teachers, administrators, and parents as they're trying to navigate these systems. Well, in Vermont, we need to make sure everybody's getting a quality education, and that would be important. Quality education, I'm thinking about. Could you repeat the question so I make sure I capture it?
So your two top priorities in making education accessible for our students and affordable for Vermont homeowners.
So again, with the quality education, making sure our public schools get the funding that they need so that they can thrive. And right now, homeowners are feeling the brunt of the weight when it comes to paying for it. And so creating a model that's more sustainable so that homeowners are not feeling that weight, and we're able to provide Vermonters with quality education, so doing both. And one of the ways I would do that is considering having those who have more pay more to make sure that they can fund also our education, our healthcare, and Vermont in a beautiful way.
In certain faith traditions, we talk about being good stewards of the earth. What does this phrase mean to you? And how would you, as governor, ensure Vermonters are being good stewards of the earth? And what is your top environmental policy goal?
So when I think about being a good steward of what we have, I think about taking care of our natural Vermont. You know, Vermont, we have no billboards, there's trees everywhere, driving through the mountains, and making sure we keep that for future generations, making sure that they have access to a healthy earth. So that would be a priority for me. And the way I would do that would make sure one of my key things is have a climate resilient community, right? Building that and making sure that people are not living on floodplains, and making sure that folks have access to just housing where they'll be okay. And let me know if I need to, did I capture everything?
How about a top environmental policy goal?
yes, okay. So my top environmental policy goal would be, again, climate resilient communities. So supporting and promoting just any policies to make sure that folks are safe in their homes, because the floods that happened this year, and actually your community was heavily impacted. I actually was here in July. I came to volunteer in Canvas with some of your amazing leaders, and I saw the way you came together as a community, and talk about feeling Vermont strong. I felt it, and it was also heart-wrenching because it's like, again, and climate change is real, so it's going to happen again, and how do we make sure we're ready for it?
Vermont has seen a marked difference in our climate, as you say. And seasons with that, an increase in unexpected natural disasters and more acute extreme weather events over the past few years, including unseasonably hot, warm temperatures, catastrophic flooding, poor air quality due to smoke from forest fires in Canada, and more. How will your administration, if elected, address changes needed to both state and local emergency preparedness plans?
So I would update the state and local emergency preparedness plans and make sure we have funding set aside so that we're not waiting on federal dollars to really give people what they need at the time that they need it, would be important to me. And also, with the climate resilient efforts, I talked about it again, but restoring the wetlands and the forest, again, keeping our natural resources, they are natural buffers to flooding, so how do we create more of that in our state? And so working and partnering with other organizations to help us get to a place where we can protect ourselves.
Thank you. How would you reduce the income inequality in our state? What specific policies will you help enact into law?
I'll go back to fair taxation. So making sure that the wealthiest folks who live here pay their fair share to really help us And so the burden's not on, oh, yes. So the burden's not on the lower and middle class folks who are breaking, our backs are breaking from all that, from all the things, from housing to healthcare to childcare, everything adds up. And so making sure that there are folks here paying their fair share. I had the opportunity to read a letter sent by the one percenters of some one percenters. This is about 20 people who signed a letter to legislators saying, hey, we want to pay more. We are wealthy. Vermont has been a gift to us. So we have a group of folks here who want to pay more. So making sure we're tapping into that resource to take the burden off of the low and middle income.
And the last question is, as justice-seeking people of faith, our leaders are wondering, if elected, what would your administration's priorities be for corrections reform in Vermont? What steps would you take to have all youth and adults placed in out-of-state facilities returned home?
Well, I would absolutely have them come home. That would definitely be a priority, and make sure that our facilities are humane, because from what I hear, they're not looking too good. And that our focus is rehabilitation. So people go into prisons, but what about when they come out? Are they ready to be citizens and active citizens and able to get a job or have housing or be okay? So what resources are we connecting them with? And so that would be a priority for me to make my administration. It would be a priority for us to really make sure that people, when they go in, they're able to come out and thrive as well.
Thank you. And your ending statement, closing statement?
I will say thank you again for having me. And I will also say that I have chosen an Everest to climb. But it is important for our democracy that we are not afraid of having hard conversations, even when the odds are against us. And so I choose, who do I choose to be as a chosen Vermonter? I choose to be one that is not okay with the status quo of what is acceptable, but one that will advocate for all to thrive here and do well here and call out injustice and call out when things aren't fair. And we can do that together. You don't have to run for governor to do so, but in my case, I chose that path. But just know that I will continue to. I will continue to be a voice here in Vermont. And if you want to learn more, please visit estherforvt.com. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Ms. Charleston, the Democratic candidate for governor in Vermont, and thank you, Deacon Beth Ann Mayer. Our next candidate will be June Goodhead from the Peace and Justice Party. She will be questioned by Canon Walter Brownridge at Christ Church, Montpelier. So Canon Brownridge will come up, and we're going to go get Ms. Goodhead as well. And I will say that this is being recorded. It will be on the Vermont Interfaith Action website, and we're also going to share it out as widely as we can. And you all can help us do that as well. Some of you who are technologically able, make sure that the link gets shared. So June Goodhead from the Peace and Justice Party.
Hello. Hello. Just do.
Good afternoon. Ms. Goodhead or June.
Good man. She has a
Good man. I'm sorry. My apologies.
3-minute opening statement.
3-minute opening statement.
Okay. Hi, I'm June. I'm a candidate for governor because I want to be a voice for the people who can't bankroll candidates. or pay lobbyists. As the influence of big money in government grows, the gap between the rich and the rest of us gets wider and wider, and the results are disastrous. Rising homelessness and hunger, people can't afford the medications they need or the healthcare services they need. A lot of us are one illness or injury away from losing everything we've worked for all our lives. Young people are having a hard time moving out of their family homes because they can't afford to. This is happening because the government has abdicated responsibility for the common good. We need a governor and legislature that commit to putting people over profits and are willing to work together to address the financial struggles of Vermonters and the climate emergency. As governor, I'd start by implementing the universal health care bill that has been in place since before the current governor took office. This would allow us to join the developed world, where everyone has access to health care, and they pay about half as much per person as we do, and they have better outcomes than we do. I think we can afford to pay less and get less suffering and premature death. I'd work with the legislature to assure that everyone's able to meet their basic needs by investing in people and communities. I promote the development of community care teams where people can go and easily access what they need sorry, I messed this up. I promote the development of community care teams where people can go and easily access what they need to help them solve problems they're facing in their lives and thrive. It would also be a hub where people could find ways to contribute to the community to the best of their ability. We need to cut our greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon. We also need to build resilient local economies and social networks to support our people in the face of the inevitable challenges of climate change. We can build local systems of food production and distribution, and we can reinforce and build strong local economies and support networks within communities that would allow people to be resilient in the face of climate change. By working together, we can implement responsible regulation and fair taxation, and make the investments in people and communities that we need to address the urgent issues facing the state of Vermont.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Now, the first question is a two-part question, and it relates to housing and shelter here in Vermont. The current lack of shelter and housing in many parts of Vermont is at a level of crisis that demands immediate response from state officials. Vermont rates second in the nation per capita for unhoused people and families. The first part of this question is, what concrete steps would your administration take to most effectively reduce homelessness in Vermont? And secondly, what concrete steps will your administration take to increase the availability of affordable housing in the states? And you have 2 minutes. So.
I see these two questions as very closely linked. People need stable, affordable housing. And if we invest in that, we will cut a lot of other costs for physical and mental health care, for crime, for substance abuse services. We will still need to have those services, but there will be less if people have stable, safe housing. I would require employers to pay working people enough so that they can live without government subsidies. I would roll back rents so that instead of doubling in the last 4 years, they only increased at the level that other inflation increased. I would purchase and build housing. Not me personally, I would ask for a government program that purchased and built housing and then empowered the Vermont Economic Development Agency to give no-interest loans or low-interest loans so that people can have stable long-term housing. I'd establish new regulations and supports to create emergency housing access. And that's a whole complicated other piece.
Thank you. Second question relates to transportation, which can influence someone's job prospects, accessibility to essential services like medical appointments, and has an impact on the environment. If elected, what are your top two transportation policy priorities?
Well, my two priorities are to get people from where they are to where they need to be when they need to be there. That's priority one. It also includes getting goods there. And my second is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The problem with this is I don't have a complete plan for this. I'm not involved in all the levels of technical stuff that would be involved. I realize that rail is the most efficient way to transport goods and people, but we don't have a good rail system, and building one would be extremely expensive. So I don't have all the solutions. I do know that the legislature is in charge of coming up with solutions and finding ways to fund them, and that I would support the legislature in these efforts and bring together experts in various fields with the legislators. And by experts, I don't just mean the engineers, I also include people in communities who need services, because they know what services they need, they know what works for them and what doesn't.
Thank you. Third question is in education, which has been widely talked about in Vermont this year. Should you become governor, what would be your top two priorities in making education accessible for our students and affordable for Vermont homeowners?
I want to see every child have access to quality public education. And I believe that at this point we need to move to a progressive statewide income tax and a level funding system per student with variables for building maintenance and for special ed needs. And that when special ed needs are identified, like through an IEP, then funding can be released for that special ed need. That would allow every school in Vermont to have the same quality of services, or should. I would also implement the universal health care plan, because that would cut school budgets. I think the ripple effects of doing that are often overlooked.
Thank you. In certain faith traditions, we talk about being good stewards of the earth. What does that phrase mean to you? How would you, as governor, ensure Vermonters are being good stewards of the earth? And the third part of this question is, what is your, and you may have talked about this already, but what is your top environmental policy goal?
I don't see humans as the owners of the earth or the owners of creation. I see us as being part of it. And that we need to be responsible for what we do that destroys our planet to the point where it's no longer livable for us or many other species. I can't ensure what every Vermonter is going to do, but I can support actions that encourage responsible agricultural practices, and once again, local food distribution and production, and that reduce greenhouse gases. And I want to look at what our industries do and how we create damage and what we can do to change that. Generally, I find Vermonters want a clean environment, clean air, clean water, and quality food. And we can do this if we set I'm not as clear on this one. We can do this. We have to be responsible members of the biosphere.
Thank you. This next question continues on the same theme. Vermont has seen a marked difference in our climate and seasons, and along with that, an increase in unexpected natural disasters and more acute extreme weather events over the past few years, including unseasonably hot, warm temperatures, catastrophic flooding, poor air quality due to smoke from forest fires in Canada, and more. How will your administration, if elected, address changes needed to both state and local emergency preparedness plans?
I think we have to first understand that this is not a series of discrete emergencies, but a predictable pattern that we've set in place. There's a pattern that started and is probably going to continue and is predictable by scientists. We need to do active things like expand the floodplain area that's available, possibly change some transportation routes, move housing away from the low valleys when possible, and certainly not build new housing there. And we have to recognize that these are something that will recur and that we need to budget for and plan for. We now have some experience with flooding. We have some experience with wildfire smoke. We need to use that experience to build on it and figure out what are the best plans. Once again, pull together the experts, but also build a resilient, strong community that can handle what comes at us. And that's often, I keep saying over and over again, invest in communities, invest in people in communities. And we need to invest less in prisons and in other problem-causing situations. Sorry.
Thank you. Next question is, how would you reduce the income inequality in our state? What specific policies will you help enact into law?
I strongly support universal health care, a livable pay for essentially full-time work, progressive taxation, a corporate tax that increases when the lowest paid person is paid half as much or less than that than the highest paid person or owner of a company. I would also try to build cooperative businesses, encourage cooperative businesses by changing regulations and making it easier for cooperative businesses to form, and by giving businesses that are closing encouragement, let's say, to sell their business to workers, and I would support that happening. Because I think if people own their own businesses, then the profit is shared among the workers.
Thank you. Our final question is this one. As justice-seeking people of faith, our leaders are wondering, if elected, what would your administration's priorities be for corrections reform in Vermont? What steps would you take to have all youth and adults placed in out-of-state facilities to be returned home?
I would start by saying I don't think many of the people that are in prison need to be there. I believe we need a few people in prison because of major public safety concerns, but most people will be released to their communities, and we should start from day one helping them to be able to function well in their communities. Or in other communities, if they can't be in their own community, for example, if there's domestic violence or violence towards a neighbor, to start again, to provide adequate help with problems that cause some of their behavior issues, and once again, to build the community supports and connection that reduce mental health problems and reduce erratic behavior, which is often the problem for people. If we had less people in the prisons, we could keep more here. I think with youth especially, it is almost never appropriate to imprison them.
Thank you, June Goodman.
3 minutes.
And now we have a 3-minute closing.
I didn't prepare a closing. I wonder if anyone has a question? Yes?
Hi, I might not be alive in 2 years, but the state of Vermont will be here. What would you like Vermont to look like in 2 years? That's radically different from today. Something that not merely you'd like to see, but you think might actually get done.
I believe we could
Can you-
implement the
can you
universal.
Repeat the question for the folks on.
Oh, the question was, in 2 years, what would I like to see change that I realistically believe could be changed? We already have a law for universal health care in Vermont. I think we could be on track for full implementation of that in 2 years. It would take a little while. It can't just happen tomorrow, but we can get the process started, get the Green Mountain Care Board involved, and begin to shift Blue Cross Blue Shield over into administering a universal health plan, start to work with the federal government about bringing in Medicaid and Medicare, and find ways to do this. So that's a big change. I think we can set up a structure to begin to invest more in permanent long-term housing. I think we could start to do programs that keep people in their homes when they otherwise are threatened, or help them find other homes immediately. I think we can have more effective short-term strategies for housing. I realize 2 years is actually a pretty short time as governments work.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have a question? Because I prefer to answer questions or connect with people.
We got 1 minute left.
Okay, no more questions.
Quick question.
Oh, one more.
I have yet to hear a person either involved actively in government or seeking to be involved in government say the secret magic word, that's a phrase, demand reduction. We hear endlessly about drug problems. Nobody ever mentions that. What is your take on that? How?
Demand reduction with the drug problem?
Yes, what do we do about that?
Okay, the key to prevention is, this comes from a study done with rats, unfortunately. But what they found with rats is if you put them in a regular cage alone, they push the lever to get the heroin or the cocaine all the time. If you put them in a rat heaven where they've got other rats to hang out with and places to climb and things to chew, they try that button and then they say, it's not what I want most. And I think that if we can create environments where people have their basic needs met, we can reduce the demand for drugs.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, June Goodhead of the Peace and Justice Party. So thank you very much. And
Good man.
I am so sorry. June Goodman of the Peace and Justice Party. And Ken and Walter Brownridge from Christ Church in Montpelier. Is Kevin Hoyt online?
He is coming. He was here right at 4. He's
Oh, okay.
joining us in 2 minutes.
Okay,
So
so we got a 2-minute break, then Reverend Joan Javier Duval, I got that one right, from the Unitarian Church in Montpelier, will do the questioning of Kevin Hoyt online. And so we got just a couple of minutes.
give us a minute. I just contacted him. So
Okay.
Is he still queuing time here? Or does he have somebody doing it online?
Yeah, actually, you know, yeah, what, and you'll need to do it here where
Yeah.
you can see the sign.
Okay, up here, right,
Right, you have to show it into the
yeah,
camera,
yeah. That's why I was asking.
maybe too close there.
The Vermont,
Here's Kevin.
state anthem.
Oh, there you go.
No, there we go.
I know it too, every word.
I was thinking Moonlight in Vermont, so.
Hey guys, can you hear me now?
Very good. So, welcome, this is Kevin Hoyt, he is an independent candidate, and Kevin will be questioned online by Reverend Joan Javier Duval from the Montpelier Unitarian Church. Kevin, just so you know, there is a 3-minute opening statement, there will be 7 questions, 2 minutes apiece, a 3-minute closing statement, and Linda Webster will hold up a sign. We've got 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, and when it's time to stop on this camera here.
Okay, that sounds great.
Hi, Mr. Hoyt. Nice to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. It's nice
Great.
to meet you back. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. So our first set of questions has to do with shelter and housing. The current
Joan, 3-minute opening
Oh, I'm
statement.
sorry.
Oh,
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Mr. You have a 3-minute opening.
gotcha. 3-minute opening. So I guess people want to know a little bit about me, and I guess that's fair. I'm a born and raised native Vermonter. The Hoyts came here. My 5 times great grandfather Harry was actually the first free Hoyt. Him and his father David fought against England way back when, I think, for these very rights and freedoms on this very same soil. So I'm an independent candidate. I'm an independent thinker, and I think it takes an outside the box candidate to get us out of the mess that we're in. Got some tremendous policy, and I hope people take the time to check me out and give me a review. So again, thank you. I want to thank the Interfaith Church for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. So here's the first question. The current lack of shelter and housing in many parts of Vermont is at a level of crisis that demands immediate response from state officials. Vermont ranks 2nd in the nation per capita for unhoused people and families. What concrete steps would your administration take to most effectively reduce homelessness in Vermont? And secondly, what concrete steps would your administration take to increase the availability of affordable housing in the state?
Wow, and I get 2 whole minutes to answer that question, huh? It's a complex question, complex issue. I think the overall problem here is the cost of living, i.e. taxes. Here's some new words: tax break, tax cut, or ROI, return on investment. My policies come with a lot of those things. We rank number 1 in corruption. I don't know if people are aware of that. Vermont State, again, for like the 3rd year in a row. So I think accountability has a lot to do with this, and the opioids is another one. My number 1 policy is opioids, and I want to make sure people hear me loud and clear. I have a solution, a proven way out of the opioid crisis. My plan is to lead Vermont and then the entire nation out of that dilemma. So again, housing is hard to find as it is. Affordable housing is non-existent. I think immigration is another factor here. I've got a heart, but when we bring in all these outside people, a lot of the homeless right now are transients, but then the immigrants that we bring in, I think they get the first dibs on housing. And I want to take care of Vermonters very, very soon. I see the sign over there too. So again, I think housing developments, more economic growth and developments, jobs, we obviously need to build places for these people to go.
Thank you. Second question. Transportation can influence someone's job prospects, accessibility to essential services like medical appointments, and has an impact on the environment. If elected, what are your top 2 transportation priorities?
Well, this is another complicated issue. I think the green energy, I'm going to say lie, has our hands tied. Right now, what happens is our legislators have already passed this, so we have to reduce carbon emissions by 80%. So now agencies, the appointed officials like the Department of Transportation, have to, make that work. 80% reduction is a big deal. I'm made out of carbon, you're made out of carbon. I love white-tailed deer, plants, again, farming. Al Gore wants to ban farming. This is where like the bike paths are coming in, right? All over Vermont state right now, we have bike paths. That's actually another land grab by your state, hundreds of thousands of acres, half-mile strip, hundreds of miles long, all up and down Vermont. I think there's some amazing new technologies coming, right? So Elon Musk is about to unleash his hydrogen car. I've actually seen engines myself that run on air and water, and I think there's a lot of great things that are coming. Again, the answer, I think, is economic growth and development. Jobs is a big thing. We need to make these things affordable. Transportation is very, very important. I think the bus systems that we use right now are, in the process till we get there because it's a demand. But I think new things are coming. I think that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Education has been a widely talked about topic in Vermont this year. Should you become governor, what would be your top 2 priorities in making education accessible for our students and affordable for Vermont homeowners?
Wow. Well, this is close number 2 for me. Right behind my opioid policy is my education reform, and I think it takes total reform. About 85% of our taxes right now go to education, and we're up to like $39,000 per student. We're talking about elementary schools, and I think that's outrageous. So I think we need to get the state. I think we need to get the Chinese core curriculum. It's Chinese. I think the teachers union need to get out of education. I think simply put, the future of education in Vermont State is private schools, home schools, and charter schools. And it's as simple as the money follows the student. That's another racket. They bury these costs in education. So I think we need to take it from their pocket and actually put it into the future of our children. Thank you.
Great, next question. In certain faith traditions, we talk about being good stewards of the earth. What does this phrase mean to you? How would you, as governor, ensure Vermonters are being good stewards of the earth? And what is your top environmental policy goal?
Wow, I think this is a giant one for Vermonters. I think, our outdoor natural renewable resources are core values for Vermonters: clean air, clean water, clean soil, and food. I've been a conservation educator for like 3 decades. I was actually nominated for Field and Stream magazine's Heroes of Conservation along with the humanitarian. So I'm an animal lover and a huge conservationist. I think we need to hold some of the, companies responsible, right, for these disasters actually accountable. That's a big thing. And again, I believe in Bobby Kennedy's idea. Maybe we should ban poison farming practices. Not sure why we have poison farming practices, but that's a good idea, Mr. Kennedy. I also plan on stopping the poisoning of Vermonters, i.e. chemtrails, aerosol spraying. I think we're up to 8 states that have already started that process, but there's going to be no more poisoning of Vermonters. So we're going to ban geoengineering. And again, we got some sustainable farming I'll talk about in a little while. Food and hemp, the stuff that we're doing with that is absolutely incredible. But one of the biggest things is we need to hold offenders accountable. Thank you.
Continuing on the environmental thread of questions, Vermont has seen a marked difference in our climate and seasons. And along with that, an increase in unexpected natural disasters and more acute extreme weather events over the past few years. including in unseasonably hot and warm temperatures, catastrophic flooding, poor air quality due to smoke from forest fires in Canada, and more. How will your administration, if elected, address changes needed to both state and local emergency preparedness plans?
Well, and there's a couple different levels to this question. First of all, as far as preparedness, I would like to come up with like a Vermont Liberty Regiment. And I'm going to explain that with militia, even though that's a bad word. This would have a security division, which would be our militia, if you will, the guys that are training. But it would also be working hand in hand with the state for the next Hurricane Irene, right? So again, as the leader of the Bennington Liberty Regiment, next time there's a natural disaster, I could show up and it's a group of citizens. Like say, I'm Kevin, I'm the leader. I got 100 men and 25 trucks and 16 generators. Where do you need us? I think we kind of do that naturally as Vermonters at the same time. But once again, I think this geoengineering, people should be asking Governor Phil Scott or any of your legislators, what our state's geoengineering budget is and how do they think that affects the health and well-being of Vermonters. Again, they've been spraying us with aluminum, barium, cadmium, lithium. Look at the spiking cancer rates. There should be no wonder why grandma has dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Our children are being born with Alzheimer's autism. Through executive order, I plan on banning the poisoning aerosol spraying of Vermonters. I have 4 executive orders. 1, we're going to not poison Vermonters anymore. Number 2, I'm going to write myself out of a job. I'm going to mandate term limits, not only for the elected, but the appointed officials. We got to make sure this accumulation of wealth and power never happen again. We're going to become a Second Amendment sanctuary state so you can protect your property and your family. You're going to keep your guns. And the last ones, we're going to legalize plant medicine so we can actually start curing people. Thank you.
Next question, how would you reduce the income inequality in our state? What specific policies will you help enact into law?
Well, and again, this is a complex issue, but I think accountability has a lot to do with this. Right now, we're having a big divide. The difference between the poor and the elite, it's becoming ever more apparent. And I think a lot of those are criminals, actually, a lot of those elite. And I think we're discovering some amazing things as of lately. So I think accountability has a lot to do with it. And I think economic growth and development, again, my solution and way out of the opioid crisis comes with a huge amount of economic growth and development. So we're talking about opportunity, talking about jobs for everybody, and hopefully we can pick ourselves out of that. Judicial reform has another big part of that. We'll get into some other stuff. Thank you, Joan. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for your responses so far. This is the final question. As justice-seeking people of faith, our leaders are wondering, if elected, what would your administration's priorities be for corrections reform in Vermont? What steps would you take to have all youth and adults who are placed in out-of-state facilities returned home?
A lot of times when they're placed in out-of-state facilities, it's for a reason. Like we don't want them in their comfort level where they can get out and know the area, right? So a lot of times that's for a reason. But I see a lot of people trading places. What I've learned, I guess, in the last 8 or 10 years is the rules, the laws, the Constitution, they're pretty awesome, but they only apply to us, the little people, as where our Congress and the elite seem to do what they want with impunity. So I think accountability is a big part of this. Again, our for-profit police and prison system, we really, really need to look at that. I think we have complicit judicial and media. I need total judicial and prison reform if I get in as governor again. I think a lot of people are going to be trading places. As far as bringing back, our local people, especially the youths, I think that's a good idea for the kids. I don't think they need to be out of state. And I'll end with, again, I'm a reporting party for our multi-state federal RICO investigation, which is short for racketeering. We've all been racketeered. And what we're finding is it's our own governments, right? From the local level all the way to the federal government, including law enforcement, judicial. So a lot of our local people were watching, resign, retire, move, disappear. I'm the reporting party for my local sheriff. People told me to tell my sheriff the charges on the statewide issue law enforcement BOLO for my sheriff included human trafficking, drug trafficking, murder, and obstruction. So we've been slowly removing these corrupt officials for the last 2 years. Just the media hasn't told you yet. In fact, the media is going with them. And again, I see a lot of people trading places, but that's total reform. I think we have to totally reform our entire government. In fact, the government as we know it, I think is gone, and I don't think it's coming back. But I like to predict the future by making it. So we're in the position to do that. I think the future is bright, beautiful, and looks good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyt. And now you have up to 3 minutes for a closing statement if you wish.
Closing statements. Well, Vermonters have choices this year. I mean, I'm already watching. Here we are, less than a month away from elections, and the media has not even released my press releases yet. They don't even tell people I'm running. So I see the 2024 cheat still in progress. My journey here, this adventure started in 2018 when I did an old school election audit in Bennington, Vermont. I can prove 60 to 70% fraud, trace it back at least to 1975. We released over 500 fraudulent names in a county of 5,500 people, and that was just the A's and half the B's. We got Governor Scott, the most popular governor in Vermont history in 2020. That was pretty impressive, but it might help that we had 102% turnout. Vermont State was one of 6 that actually had more ballots than legal age voters. Houston, we have problems. So again, I think it takes my best attribute is I'm not a politician. I'm a deer hunter from Bennington. I'm a Vermonter and a common sense guy, independent thinker, like I said. And I think that's what it takes to get us out of this mess. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate your time, ladies.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here first and foremost. This was recorded, will be available on the Vermont Interfaith Action website. We hope that we can share it. We'll share it with our mailing list as well. And we hope that can be shared widely. I want to thank our questioners as well. Thanks to Deacon Beth Ann Mayer, Karen Walter Brownridge, and Reverend Joan Javier Duval. And thanks to the candidates, Esther Charleston from the Democratic Party, June Goodband from the Peace and Justice Party, and Kevin Hoyt, an independent. We did invite all the candidates that qualified for the ballot. Phil Scott declined our invitation. We did have, though, a statement from Hoa Mutino, who has now suspended his campaign, and he said, thank you to Vermont Interfaith Action for inviting me to the forum today. While not able to attend, I wish to relay my endorsement of Esther Charleston for governor. I admire Esther's commitment to the people of Vermont. You should have received in the mail by yesterday a ballot. If you did not receive that ballot, please be in touch with your city or your town clerk to make sure that you get your ballot so that you are eligible to vote. You can go ahead and turn that ballot in either by mail or by taking it to the clerk's office, or you can come on out on November 5th. But I got 3 words for you: vote, vote, vote. And so that's what we can really do. That's where the power is as we gather here today. So I want to thank Melissa Bata, our interim director for Vermont Interfaith Action. Thanks to Linda Webster for being our timekeeper as well, and to Steve Finner for signing everyone in today. So thank you so much. I know that Ms. Goodband has stayed here to talk to you if you want to